Good evening and welcome again to Sacred Heart Catholic Church in Conroe. And what a wonderful evening we have prepared for you as you join us here in person as well as virtually. Tonight again we welcome Brianna Fetkovich, who serves as the Director of the Outreach for Street Grace in Houston, and helping to bring her experience working with the exploited and vulnerable all over the world to this particular organization. She comes with much experience, for those who heard her last time that she was here, and trying to help us to deal with the very difficult topic, that of human trafficking, particularly of our youth and children, and how it is that we need to be both aware and proactive to be able to stop human trafficking in our area in any way that it is present. So once again, I ask you to join me in welcoming Brianna.
Thank you so much. It is an honor and a pleasure to be with all of you. Thank you for joining us, those of you that are here in person, and really huge thanks to all of you that are joining us online and might be watching this tomorrow and for days to come. I'm really thankful for technology that allows us to all be together, and this is really my favorite kind of an evening because I love speaking to students, because while this is an important topic for adults to know about, this is an important topic that I spend time talking with, legislative representatives of our community, with law enforcement, with many other influential people in the community. They really do not have the kind of influence that students have to make a difference on such an important issue of human trafficking. And so this is going to be kind of a two-part conversation. I want to talk to you a little bit about what is this thing called human trafficking, and does it look like we see on Facebook or Instagram or social media or movies? How do I learn more about this global issue as somebody who is a follower of Christ, somebody who should care deeply about things like injustice happening in our community? So that's kind of the first part that we're going to walk through together. And then the second part is, how do I make sure that I don't have blinders on to go, well, this would never happen to me or to anyone I know, and how can I look out for the people that are a part of my circle, the people that go to your school, that you are in clubs with, the people that you are in sports with, and the people that you hang out with, that we as Street Grace will never get the opportunity to meet some of the people that you know. And so this conversation tonight is designed for students and for parents of students, and so I really want to equip you with not only the knowledge and the tools for you to understand this bigger issue, but to be a light into your community and to look out for one another. Because we know that when students are looking out for one another, and you're talking about these things in your school, there's going to be a lot more credibility than an adult or even a teacher talking about something like this. And so you really do have power and you really do have influence. So I'm glad you all are here. We're going to start by just watching a short little video. If we can hear it. Stand by, he says. We'll try again. So, what is human trafficking? This is a term that you might have heard. It's been popular in 2020 on social media and in the news. We've heard things about a guy named Jeffrey Epstein and, the Wayfair company hiding children in their cabinets, and Pizzagate and QAnon and all of these kind of things that it's really hard to know what's true. I've seen so many things on social media. I don't know if you have a TikTok account, those in the room, but there's been a lot of fake news on TikTok, things that I've seen. One of those is if you go out to your car and you see a jar of honey overturned on the hood of your car, that means that a sex trafficker, is probably under the car or on the other side of the car, and he's going to grab you. So watch out for that. I've seen a similar one that says if you go, same thing, if you go out to your car, maybe it's parked in front of your house or at school or in a parking lot, and you see a zip tie on your mirror, that means that a trafficker has tagged you, and you better watch out because they're going to get you. And so a lot of these things are pervasive on social media, and it can really be hard to know what's true and what isn't. So that's what I'm here to do today, is to kind of debunk some of those myths and some of those things that if you thought human trafficking was one thing and you find out that it's really not, that's nothing to be embarrassed about. It's a topic that many of us, it's really new to us. Human trafficking is not an issue that's new at all, however. It's something that has been happening for hundreds, arguably thousands of years, and it's something that's happening all over the world. Let's go to the next slide. I think I've got a chart for you. Oh, some fact or fiction, actually, before we get to the chart. So I want you to take a look at these, and we're going to read through them together and then keep them on your brain because we're going to address them at the end of the presentation, and I feel confident that you're going to be able to answer all of them correctly. So, are these fact or fiction? Just be thinking. Predators target students that they don't know. Only girls or women can be victims. Trafficking involves kidnapping or moving someone from place to place. People being trafficked are usually held against their will. Trafficking usually happens to foreigners or in other countries. Trafficking only happens in the city. Most kids that are trafficked, they come from troubled homes. Trafficking can happen online. Pornography is connected to human trafficking. And sexting can put you at risk for exploitation. So be thinking about those. Next slide, please. So this is a number that might surprise you. I know there are a lot of young men joining us today, and that makes my heart really happy because we really need young men, especially that care about this issue of exploitation. I think that God has designed you in a specific way to make a really, really big difference in this. Not that girls don't have that same ability, but there is something innate in the heart of a man that we really, really need, and we need young men that care about this issue. But a lot of guys, they check out when they hear the word human trafficking, and even some parents think, well, at least I don't have to worry about that with my boys. Well, these numbers would say something different. If you look at this, 1 in 4 girls, and not that far behind, 1 in 6 boys will be sexually exploited before their 18th birthday. And so I put this up there to help you understand that this is no small issue. There was a study done a couple of years ago by a university in Texas, and they told us that out of those students that were reported victims of human trafficking, there was almost 80,000 in the state of Texas. Now, keep in mind, most students, if something like this happens to them, they don't ever report it, and nobody ever finds out. And so that's not a small number. If you were to take 80,000 kids and this number, this breakdown of 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys, it would look like about 2,000 school buses lined up end to end, and that's just representative of all of the kids who there's been a report made that something like this has happened to them. And so this is something that is kind of hiding in the shadows. Many people don't realize that, I guarantee it, you have interacted with another student who has been a victim of trafficking or exploitation. Whether they're in your school, whether you saw them at the grocery store, whether they're on your sports team, you have interacted with them. The data and the numbers tell us that. But that's something that we don't often recognize because we don't know what we're looking for, or students, maybe even students that are watching this tonight. they don't know that there are words to put to their situation. And so we're going to give you the words tonight and let you know how you can get some help if that's you or somebody that you know. Next one. So who is vulnerable to this thing called exploitation? And I thought that I had a chart here, and it may come up later. I can't always remember the order of my slides, but it's important for me to help you all understand before we go into who exactly is vulnerable is what exactly are we talking about when I say the word sex trafficking? So we did some of the myths, and throughout this you're going to figure out whether those were fact or fiction, some of those things I put up. But many people think that this is just somebody who has been kidnapped and they're being sexually abused, or they're being kidnapped and being forced to work as a prostitute, or a bad kid that's run away and they're working as a prostitute. Well, I want to let you know that actually in the state of Texas, there's no such thing as a child prostitute. That's because if you're a minor in the state of Texas and you are even selling your photos, or an adult is viewing sexually explicit photos of you, you're by definition a victim of human trafficking, or the longer phrase that we use, the commercial. So that just means selling, exchanging something of value, exploitation, so somebody taking advantage of somebody else for their own selfish gain, of children. And that's you all, that's students, that's minors in the state of Texas. And so by definition, there's no such thing as a child prostitute, because a child cannot willingly participate in a sexual encounter where something is exchanged. They're a victim of sex trafficking. Now, when we're talking about adults, there is a difference. There is a difference between somebody who chooses a sexually exploitive job as a profession and somebody who's a victim of human trafficking. But the vast majority of people that we would see on TV, that we would hear as maybe an escort, or maybe somebody that's working as a stripper or a prostitute, they are people that they didn't choose that lifestyle. Actually, they're victims of what we call three things. Force. So that one's pretty easy to understand. Somebody that's being forced into a situation that they don't want to do. Fraud. So they're being misled in some way. They were being promised something that's not true. Or coercion. So that's somebody who's manipulating them, whether they're threatening to harm them, somebody they love. Maybe they've gotten themselves into a position where they can't pay their rent. They can't take care of their children. They can't feed themselves. They don't have a roof over their head. And so somebody else offers to provide those things for them, but they have to provide sexual services in exchange. And so I want to challenge you, and I want to challenge you that the words that we use matter. I hate to admit this, but when I was in high school, I didn't know about this. I didn't know about human trafficking. I didn't know that this was a global problem that happened to men, women, and children. And even when I did hear about this in college, I still thought it was over there. I thought it was in India and China and Thailand. I had no idea that human trafficking is actually a here problem. And what I mean by that is wherever here is for you. So you may not be joining us online from Conroe. You might be in Waller. You might be in California. There's human trafficking wherever you are, because this is a human problem created by demand, and demand is everywhere. And so I used to make jokes about strippers and prostitutes and pimps, because I was a kid that grew up in the church, and we were good, and we would never do that kind of thing, and it just seemed so far over here. But that was because I didn't know. I didn't know that these weren't just promiscuous women who had chosen a negative way of life that seemed to be outside of the plans that God had for their life. I didn't realize that these are oftentimes victims of horrific circumstances, and that I, as a person of faith, should care deeply about people that are being affected by injustice. And I certainly didn't know that there were members of my community that were being bought and sold by their parents or by their uncles, or being forced to take pictures of themselves and send them online for fear of somebody charging them money or threatening to reveal evidence of their conversations or harming their little brother. I didn't know any of that was going on. But after tonight, you all can never say that you didn't know. And so I don't want you to be in the same position as me, and I want you to understand that the words that we use matter. And so I'm going to talk about some different things. I'm going to talk about who's vulnerable. I'm going to talk about this thing we call sex trafficking, like I said, is a global thing, but it's also a very local thing that doesn't look like the movie Taken, if you've seen that, where Liam Neeson's college-age daughter, he goes to Europe, she meets this really handsome boy. That's accurate, because a lot of times the people that want to take advantage of you, they don't look like a creeper. They look like somebody really handsome or really beautiful, and they might look just like you. So she meets this college guy at the airport, and they say, hey, what are you doing later? You should come to hang out at our party. So she goes to a party, and by the way, this is good advice. Don't go to a party with somebody that you met at the airport. Not good advice. So her and her friend go to a party, and they end up kidnapping and drugging the girls, and then they end up being confined and chained up, and they end up being sold for sex. And so Liam Neeson is the dad, and he's the hero of the story, and he somehow, by some crazy series of events, is able to fly to Europe, and based on one phone conversation he has with his daughter, he's able to rescue her from this brothel. And so that provides an unrealistic expectation and understanding of what trafficking is. People don't have to be confined. Actually, the vast majority of the kids in our community that are being exploited, they're living at home. Now, home doesn't have to be with two parents. It could be with grandmother. It could be with one parent. It could be in a foster home. Could be in a residential treatment center. And most of them are participating in school or activities. And this amount of exploitation has increased a ton since the pandemic, because for some kids, home life is not safe, and they've had nowhere else to go and no one else to look in on them because of the pandemic. And so this is something that we have to understand, that we think that we're safe. We're up here in Conroe. We're away from all of the scary things in the city. But the internet kind of makes us all on the same playing field. And so take a look at this list. Who is vulnerable? Think to yourself, do any of these include me? Do any of these include anybody that I know or go to school with? Do you play online games? Now, there's nothing wrong with any of these things on the list. So I'm not saying that by one of these things applying to you that there's something wrong with you or you've done something wrong. They are just neutral items. So play online games, use social media, have ever felt self-conscious, have friends that you've never met, or you think you've met them, but they're not in real life friends. They're social media friends. Felt misunderstood. Feel frustrated by your lack of freedom. I don't know a student on the planet that hasn't been frustrated by that. You're being told where to go, what time to go to bed, what to watch, what to say, where to spend your money. Everything about your life is more or less controlled, and that can be frustrating. You or your family uses drugs or alcohol. There might be violence at your house. You live in foster care or even on the street or have spent time on the street. Or this last one, if you've thought, hey, I'm good, none of these things apply to me. What about the last one? Wished for something you couldn't have. I think that is a universal human experience, not just a student experience. And so if you answered yes to any of these questions, or anybody in your friend group or your family, you think this applies to them, guess what? That makes you vulnerable to be exploited. And I don't say that to scare you. I say that to empower you, to help you to understand that, just like that video showed at the beginning, that if we don't know who we are, if we don't know our value in Christ, if we don't know that there are things that make us vulnerable and that's okay, and if we share those with safe people in our life, then we'll know when somebody is coming into our life who's trying to take advantage of us by exploiting that vulnerability, taking that thing that, we're insecure about or that we're lacking, and they're using it. And so it's important for us to think about this list regularly and to think inward, because if we think, oh man, this doesn't apply to me, then you might find yourself in a situation that you didn't want to be in. Or you may not be able to help somebody that needs you. Next one. So this is a business, I want you to understand, and I don't know how much you know about business, but there's a pretty simple principle of what we would call economics. So that's just a business, how a business makes profit. And in order for any business to work, we have to have supply, so that's the product. So think about like the iPhone, for example. They intentionally put out a new iPhone every year or sometimes twice a year. I don't know if you've ever driven by an Apple store on the day that they released the new iPhone, but there is a line out the door and around the block, and I guarantee you that not everybody in that line has a broken phone. They're just driven by this idea that there is a new iPhone that of course has a better camera, and of course it has a few upgrades, because they all have something better. And so there is a demand for that. Now, if there was nobody lining up, then Apple could not make $1,000 or more on these cell phones. They would have to charge less because there was nobody there to purchase them. It's the exact same thing with trafficking. So the people that want the iPhone standing in line, they're the demand. The iPhone itself is the supply. And then we need somebody to connect the two, the facilitator. Well, that's the store. That's the retailer. It's not even always an Apple store. It could be Best Buy, something like that. And so all three of those things are necessary in order for Apple to continue making bazillions of dollars. And if we take away any one of those, if there's no more Apple stores, then Apple doesn't make money. If there's no more people lining up, then Apple doesn't make money. And if Apple stops producing technology that we can buy, there's no more money for Apple. And so human trafficking is exactly the same. It is driven by money. And there are three different components to human trafficking. There's the buyer. So that's the person that either wants to consume child pornography or actually meet up with a child to have a sexual experience with them. There's the supply, and I mentioned that this can happen to anyone, adults, people that come from this country, from other countries, people that live in this country, and children. At Street Grace, we focus on empowering and protecting minors, students, because we know that that's the best way that we end this thing, because students are the target. Yeah, people that are 20 and 30, they're sexually exploited too, but most of the time it happened for the first time at 13 or 14. That's the target. That's the demand. And so we want to look at all three of these things in order for us to break down the business. Human trafficking is actually the second largest, fastest growing business on the planet. It's second only to drug trafficking, and it's very, very quickly going to become number 2. So drug trafficking is just the buying and selling of drugs. But guess what? Somebody can make a lot more money buying and selling a student than they can a drug. You want to know why? Well, because you can only sell a drug one time, but you can sell a student or their photo or their video online infinite amounts of times. And it's not that difficult to get a hold of a student. Social media does a lot of the work for them. It removes some of the stranger danger. So let's take a look at the predators, otherwise known as the demand. Next one. So these are the traffickers. These are probably not what you thought. Now, culture would call them a pimp. We don't call them pimps because pimp has this kind of cool connotation, like you can dress up as a pimp for Halloween. There's TV shows like Pimp My Ride where they make cars really cool. I even saw one that was like Pimp My Cupcake. So pimp has kind of just become this casual verb to mean like something cool. There's nothing cool about somebody who manipulates the weakest part of another human being in order to make money off them, resulting in their own sexual abuse. Nothing cool about that. So I want to challenge you actually to challenge yourself and your peers to stop using the word pimp. And you don't have to shame people about it, but just let them know what it actually is and that it's not something to be celebrated. And we definitely shouldn't be having, casual parties like I've heard of people having pimp and hoe parties, for Halloween. There's really nothing cool about it at all. But you may not understand that a trafficker doesn't always look like the Halloween costume. They sometimes look like women, nice-looking women, mothers. Sometimes they look like high school or college kids that really maybe look just like you. They can be women, they could be men. They can be pastors, they can be sports coaches, they can be couples, and they can be moms. Like I said, they can be dads. And so we have to understand that just like every child, every student is actually vulnerable. It doesn't matter what part of town you live, how much money your parents make, what you look like, how much experience you have or what you know about anything, who your friends are. Every student is vulnerable, and I could tell you a story about every type of student in our area who's been exploited, and they all look different. It's the same thing with the traffickers. They do not all look the same. Next one. So, where do these predators hang out? I'm telling you that the vast majority of the kids in our community aren't kidnapped. They're not being held against their will. They're not being locked up in a hotel room. They're not being driven to Mexico. They're being exploited from home. And maybe that's just on the weekends. Maybe that's late at night. Maybe their parents have no idea what's going on. Maybe that's just from their League of Legends game, from the person that requested nudes from them and they said no. And so they're threatening them and blackmailing them. That happens every day. Happens to regular boys all the time. So these people hang out where the students are. And where have students always been? Well, at least in the last 10 years or so, everybody's kind of been hanging out in these 4 places: social media, messaging apps, online games, school, church, or clubs. But where have they been a lot during the pandemic? We've all spent a lot more time online. And unfortunately, that's the bad guys as well. They know that students have been spending more time online, so they've spent more time online. They know that students have been spending more time on social media, and so they do the same thing. There are people that spend their entire day, all day, every day, just scrolling through social media, looking for profiles that they can send a message to and maybe start a conversation, maybe start a friendship with the intent to harm eventually. Next one. So take a look at some of these apps. I'm guessing you probably will recognize some of these, and some of these you may not. It's hard for me to keep up with the apps because they're changing so rapidly. I try to talk to students a lot to find out what are the most common apps that students are using, and so this is a recent sample of what some students have been telling me is popular. We know the old standbys are probably not going anywhere: Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok. But the other ones change frequently. But there's a really sneaky tactic that predators use, and they're going to approach somebody on the ones that maybe even your parents have. So like Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, apps that we generally trust. And these apps have a lot of privacy settings. They have a lot of sophisticated technology that keeps child pornography from appearing, from sexting, from bullying, all kinds of stuff. They even pay hundreds of people to monitor these apps. Well, what about the other apps and the other 100 that aren't listed here that the sheriff's office here in our county gave me recently, where kids are frequently abused? Well, those apps aren't as regulated, and so what'll happen is they'll start messaging you on Instagram or Snapchat, and then they're going to convince you to move the conversation to another app or to download one of these apps that you don't have. That's because as the relationship progresses, and perhaps they slowly sexualize the relationship and convince you to send nude pictures, or they send pictures of themselves, or they start sending threats, that kind of thing, it can't be picked up on. And so that's a sneaky tactic that you should be aware of, and know that you should never download an app unless you know what it does. Because you should know that they're all going to ask for access to your camera, your microphone, your navigation settings, and that can be something that somebody that wants to take advantage of you can really use to their advantage. And so you really want to know what apps do, and you want to avoid apps that connect you with strangers. And definitely don't give away your personal information. Don't accept money from anybody on an app. I don't care how appealing it is to get $500 to play League of Legends. It's something that is definitely predatory behavior. If someone messages you that you don't know, they're often going to say things like, "Hey, you're really beautiful. Have you ever considered modeling?" Or, "Hey, you look like the perfect guy to represent our clothing company." Or, "Hey, do you need a job? I have one for you. It requires no experience and no application, no references." And so there are a lot of tricks that they're going to use in order to try to build a relationship with you. Next one. So you might recognize some of these if you're one of the 99% of American students who use a multiplayer video game. It's very, very common. And so these are definitely not all the games, but these are some of the most popular that students play. And all of these games are free to play, but a lot of them have things in common. You use a third-party app like Discord, a messaging app, so that you can chat back and forth with the people that you're playing with, or you can, use a headset to talk. You might stream yourself on YouTube in case you're trying to get famous. You might use Twitch to communicate as well. But this is something that many people and many parents don't even realize. They've got your phone on lockdown. They've got a million filters on your laptop and your iPad, but nobody's ever thought about protecting you from a video game. And you're like, what do I need to be protected from? Well, many students are introduced to pornography for the first time on video games, even as they're only maybe 7, 8, 9 years old. So that's something that people need to be looking out for you. Maybe on a video game, it's like a predator that I mentioned. I've known of predators who will say things like, hey, and they'll start gaming with you. They'll probably be really good at the game. They'll lie about their age, what they look like, where they go to school. Maybe they'll even pretend to be a girl in order to game with you if you're a boy, because hey, that's pretty hot, a young girl that, plays video games. And so she's going to message you, and you're going to get to know them, you're going to build trust with them, and then they're going to offer you, $100, $200 of online currency, because you can give money to anybody, not in Minecraft, but the other games. You can give money to anybody on these games, or they might ask you for money, say something crazy like, hey, you need to give me $3,000 into this cryptocurrency account right now, or else I'm going to kill your dog and blackmail you and shame you. And you're like, I'm not going to do that. I don't have $3,000. And they say, oh, well, no problem. All you have to do is send me a nude. You're like, well, I'm not going to do that either. And that's where the blackmail and the shame comes in. I've heard of boys getting messages that says like, hey, I've tapped into your webcam or your phone. I have pictures of you. I have screenshots of things that you've been looking at that you shouldn't have been looking at. And I'm going to post them online. Or I'm going to share them with your parents. Or I'm going to send them to your school. And so people end up getting themselves in a situation, we call that extortion. We actually call it sextortion. And it's happening every day. And students often are ashamed about it because they feel like they got themselves into this situation they can't tell anybody. So if that's happening to you or happening to someone you know, there's no shame in it. These guys are master manipulators. And please tell somebody that you trust. They can help you get out of the situation, block them, report them. I've even gotten these messages in my Gmail. I've gotten these as text messages, people that have said that I need to send money right now or they're going to reveal evidence of what I was looking at on my computer. Now, FYI, I do look at a lot of shady stuff on my computer because this is what I do for work. But I'm not concerned because I know this is a tactic of a predator. But some people, especially if you're a student and you don't have a lot of experience with this, you might think this person is telling the truth. And so it's important to tell somebody and to be talking about it and to look out for your friends. Next one. So what are these predators' plans? If they're not planning to figure out where you live and snatch you on your way home from school and throw you into their van, what's their plan? I'll tell you. Next one. So their plan is to groom you. Now, what does grooming mean? Well, grooming is just the process of getting to know somebody and building their trust in order to take advantage of them. And so they're going to use tricks. Now, these tricks don't always look the same for everybody, but there's an arrow there to help you understand that this is a process. This doesn't just happen overnight. Kids that are sexually trafficked in our community, they didn't just go from like having a happy life and living with their parents and being carefree and just, being in school to all of a sudden they're, have run away with their boyfriend and now they're being forced to be in a situation that they don't want to be in, or they're having sex for money. It doesn't just happen just like that. It happens like this. It's a process. Now, I've known people where this has taken 2 weeks. I know people who have stories, survivors of trafficking, who they started being groomed when they were 13 or 14, and the predator groomed them for 2 years. Sometimes this grooming process, unfortunately, happens from people that we love and we care about most. Most of the time, people are exploited by someone that they know. Now, that doesn't mean you've known them for a long time. They could be somebody that you just met online. But they're going to do all of these tricks to make you trust them. So it always starts out like this. They're going to start out and they're going to fake trustworthiness. So they're going to promise you love, romance, maybe protection, maybe friendship. Now, grooming can be a girl grooming a boy grooming a girl, a boy grooming a boy, or a girl grooming a girl grooming a girl. It can be any of these combinations. Most commonly, it's a little bit older boy grooming a younger girl, but that's not exclusive, especially if you are a boy who is in the process of trying to decide where you stand on your sexuality. There are many, many, many predators that understand that that can be a difficult situation to be in, and oftentimes you may not be accepted by your peers or your church or your parents, and so you probably feel pretty lonely and pretty vulnerable. And so that person might come in and they might be really kind to you. They might be really supportive, and they might be really complimentary and offer you love, protection, friendship, affirmation, encouragement when you don't have any. But really their motives are not pure. They just want to take advantage of you, and it can be hard to tell the difference. It can be hard to tell the difference when we don't know what we're looking for, especially because we're vulnerable. And like I said, there's no shame in being vulnerable. Adults are vulnerable too. But everybody has something different about them that makes them vulnerable. So during this fake trustworthiness stage, this person is trying to build your trust. They're going to come across as cool, normal, relatable, and they're going to say, okay, here's my target. Now, what makes them vulnerable? Now, for example, maybe this student comes from a lot of money. Their parents are very, very wealthy. The student has never wanted for anything. They've got the newest iPhone. They have an Apple Watch. They have, 1,000 pairs of Nike shoes, or every designer bag. Like, they have Lululemon clothes. Like, they have everything that they could ever really want, but, they really just want their parents to come to their soccer game, or to have a conversation with them about things that matter. And so their vulnerability is that this person's going to come in and spend time with them, tell them they're beautiful, listen to them, and do all the things that kind of they wish that their family would do for them. Or maybe they're a student that comes from poverty, and unfortunately, they've never had a pair of shoes that anybody's ever heard of the brand, and some nights they go hungry, and they don't tell anybody. And so this person is going to recognize, okay, well, this child's vulnerability is something material. And so they're going to shower you with gifts, affection, nice dinners, new clothes, maybe a new cell phone, trip to the nail salon, those kinds of things. And then we move to isolate. This is really important, and this is key. This person is going to create a divide between your friends and family. Slowly and intentionally plant seeds in your head that make you think that your parents are against you, and your friends aren't really true friends. They're talking about you behind your back. Because if they can pull you away from those people, then it's really easy to manipulate you. That's why community is important, and being vulnerable with people in your life is important. And then we get to desensitize. At this point, they're introducing you to new places, new things. Maybe they're slowly kind of pushing your boundaries and sexualizing the relationship. Maybe it's drugs, alcohol. Maybe it's parties. Maybe it's just watching movies or talking differently than you're used to. And then we get to the control and abuse. This is at the very end. And sometimes this is where somebody actually ends up being a victim of sex trafficking. So this person is no longer the nicest, kindest, most romantic person you've ever met. All of a sudden, they're being mentally, physically, emotionally abusive. And they're requiring things of you that you don't want to do. And so you just think, okay, well, why don't they just leave the relationship or tell someone? Well, they've developed a deep bond with that person, and who are they going to tell? They burned all the bridges with their friends and their family. They believe that this person genuinely cares about them. They've been spending all of their time with them, and they've been giving them the very thing that they long for the most, the thing that makes them vulnerable. How are they going to leave? That person's going to make them believe that they're stupid, that nobody's going to believe them, that they're not worth anything, that this is all that they are, that they are going to hurt them or people they know if they try to leave or try to tell anybody. And so many students end up in this situation for years. Years and years and years of abuse go on before they ever tell anybody, if ever. Next one. So why do these people do this? Well, like I said before, this is a business. And unfortunately, the traffickers want to make money. And maybe it's because their grandpa was a trafficker and their dad was a trafficker, and maybe it's just a part of their culture. Maybe they were raised in a home where there was a lot of violence, and women were not treated with respect or dignity. And so for them, this is normal. They don't know anything different. Or perhaps they're in a situation where they just really, really need cash. Or maybe they are a student who was groomed and taken advantage of themselves, and in order to keep themselves safe from beatings or more abuse, they're told to recruit other students. This happens all the time. And so there's a lot of reasons that they do it. Next one. Oh, we already discussed this. Just a reminder that this happens to boys too, talking about the video game trick. So, like I said, when somebody gets to the exploit stage, keep in mind it can be really easy to intervene on that grooming scale if you take advantage and you notice it at the beginning. You notice it in your friends, you point it out, you're looking out for them, or you're self-aware. But the closer it gets to the end of the arrow, the more difficult it is to intervene. And you might think, well, why don't they just especially if this is happening online, why don't they just block the person? That seems pretty easy. Tell somebody, block them, never talk to them again. Well, there's a lot of complex reasons. Like I said, the grooming process can take months. This is somebody that you thought you could trust, somebody you thought loved you, maybe when you think no one else in the world does. And so it can be difficult to get away because of the emotional things. Maybe the gifts are just great, the acceptance, the love. Maybe they've run away. Maybe they've gotten you hooked on a substance. Maybe you need money. Maybe your family needs money. Maybe the pandemic has been rough for you and you feel responsibility to provide, and this is a way you could do it. Or you feel like you have no potential. There's no way you're ever going to go to college or get a good job. You just don't. Life isn't just going to work out like that for you like it does for other people. But maybe this is what you can do to take care of yourself. Maybe you think that it's empowering, but you'll finally realize after a while that it's the farthest thing from empowering. Or maybe they're your family member. What do you do when it's your dad or your uncle or your mom that's selling you? You need those people for survival. Where are you going to go? And so we're going to provide those resources for you if that's you. Next one. Oh, we have another quick video.
Just met someone cute online? Texting nonstop so soon? Oh, he wants to hang out. He's so attractive and sweet. How did you get so lucky? Is this true love? This is exciting. While this may seem like a great time, receiving gifts and compliments left and right, did you notice how you became more distant from friends and family as the relationship developed? Okay, so now he's asking for pics. Not into it, but you want him to like you. So what do? Okay, enough is enough. This doesn't seem right, but you do love how he makes you feel. Now, they are threatening to share these private photos with your friends and family? This is not okay and is not love. Your parents found out, your school's involved, and you are depressed. You wonder how it got to this. What were you thinking? You want to run away to escape all of it. Sure, this doesn't happen all the time, but it happens more than you think, and anyone is vulnerable. So is it worth the risk? Even if your connection is real today, it could all change tomorrow. So be careful what you send and share. It can be hard to know who to trust with your private information. So take some time to set your own boundaries online and in real life, so you can protect yourself and your friends. Want to learn more? Check us out at streetgrace.org.
Okay, so this little video talks to us about something we call sexting. I know you all probably know what this is because it is a very, very normal, and I don't say normal because I think that this is a good thing, but it's a very common practice happening in middle school and high school around the country. And I know this from all the students that I talk with, and counselors and school principals report this to be a massive problem, and that 60% of kids don't see anything wrong with sexting. But I hope that little cartoon video, as silly as it may seem, helps you see that sexting can have some really serious consequences. We cannot always trust the people that we send our information to. And so it can really get out of control really quickly. There have been circumstances in this community where a sext has gotten shared around school, it's gotten forwarded, and bullying has happened, and suicides have even happened because of this. Students' photos are often uploaded to porn sites, and they can be almost impossible to remove. That can ruin someone's life. And so sexting is something that's actually can be illegal too, especially if an adult ends up with photos of a minor. And so yeah, it doesn't always end up that serious, but that's something to really take into consideration, that if somebody is asking you to send them a nude photo because you're in a relationship or whatever, or it's a dare, or you think it'll make you feel loved, I totally get where you're coming from. Everybody wants to be affirmed, but I want you to think twice before sending, and definitely before forwarding or sharing one of those images, because it can be something that has really, really serious consequences. Next one, please. We've got our last little video.
This is your brain. Your brain is an amazing machine. Scientists have compared it to a supercomputer. It has about 86 billion nerve cells processing information up to 268 miles per hour. It has a memory of about 1 million gigabytes. If you had that much digital music, it would take 2,000 years to play it all. Your brain can think up to 50,000 thoughts per day. Many of these thoughts are good for you. When you're learning something new, when you're feeling joy or confidence, or when you're in love. Some of these thoughts can bring you down, like when you're anxious or depressed. Other thoughts can make you feel good at first, but they actually aren't good for you at all. Like some of the things you find in the shadier corners of the internet. Sexual images may seem harmless, but pornography can have very negative effects on your brain and your relationships. When you see something you like, your brain releases a chemical called dopamine. It's usually a good thing. Dopamine helps us learn, pay attention, feel emotions, and more. But dopamine is also kind of greedy, and the more you feed it, the more it wants. When that happens, dopamine is like a drug. You need more and more just to experience the same kind of high you had before. You'll grow frustrated, always wanting more, but never feeling satisfied. Watching porn can also make you want to be alone more often, isolating yourself instead of hanging out with friends or family. This isolation leads to depression and anxiety. It can affect your moral values and discourage you from setting goals, from trying to get the most out of life. Is that what you want for your brain? Do you think that's what your brain wants or needs from you? The pornography you watch is fake. There's nothing real about it at all. It warps your idea of what love in real life is like. Real love in real life involves real feelings and real needs. Your brain, just like you, wants a good life. So stay away from porn and feed your brain the things that matter most, like faith, family, friends, exercise, art, learning, and other good things. Trust me, your brain will thank you for it.
So you might be wondering, okay, what does pornography have to do with sex trafficking? I mean, I agree it's something we should be talking about, but I don't understand that it's connected. Well, you can't actually have a conversation about sex trafficking without also having a conversation about pornography. And we know that, man, we live in a pornified world. It is almost impossible to avoid seeing pornography. It's everywhere. It's in our video games. It's in our social media. It's in messaging apps. It's always a suggestion on Netflix or Amazon. It's even in places like Pinterest or Reddit or Google. Our Chromebooks have it. Man, it is almost impossible to avoid pornography. And there's a couple of really damaging messages out there. You see, the porn industry is kind of similar to the cigarette industry. Now, I know as students, you're growing up in a world where it's not really that common for people to smoke. But at one time, it was very, very common. And back in the beginning, when people started smoking in like the 40s and 50s, people didn't realize that smoking was bad for them. And that's why you'll see a lot of smoking in movies. And people smoked inside. They smoked all the time. And they didn't know that it had really serious consequences, which we now know that smoking causes lung cancer and lots of other things and can kill you. And there was some evidence that came out to say that the cigarette companies knew long before the public knew that smoking was bad for you. But they deceived the public intentionally because they wanted to make money. The cigarette industry was a very, very wealthy industry until some lawsuits and things happened. And now, if you want to buy a pack of cigarettes, there's a warning label on cigarettes that lets you know, hey, if you choose to smoke cigarettes, it could cause lung cancer and these other things. So that people can never say, well, I didn't know the risks. Same thing with, alcohol. We put boundaries around things that can be harmful, especially to students. That's why you can't buy alcohol legally until you're 21. And that's why you can't, buy cigarettes. There's an age limit on some of these things. That's why you can't even buy a lottery ticket, because there's certain age limits on certain things. Because they know that the students' front part of the brain is where logic and reasoning comes in. Now, I don't say that to offend you. Students have a ton of logic and reasoning. Students can be so smart and so innovative, and some of the most incredible things have been come up with students, especially when it comes to technology. Y'all are phenomenal at that. But you do have a disadvantage in that front part of your brain isn't quite at its peak level of development. That doesn't happen until about 25. And so society realizes we care about students, we care about their health, we want them to be healthy students, so let's put boundaries and parameters on these things to keep them safe. Well, the porn industry is just like the cigarette industry. We could say that the cigarette industry was exploitive. They knew they were killing people, but they didn't tell anybody. The porn companies know the same thing, but they're specifically targeting you. They're targeting students with messages that says that pornography is normal, that it's harmless, that it's a good way to learn about relationships, and that you're not hurting anybody, and it's a good way to spend your time, blow off some steam, etc. And those are the messages that the porn company wants the world to know, because they're in it for the money. Would you believe me if I told you that the porn companies out there, they make up about 30% of the total searches on Google, and that porn companies are some of the richest companies in the world. They make more money, one of them called Pornhub, a big giant, they make more money than Amazon, Netflix, and Google combined. And so there's a lot at stake here for them. And so they want you to believe this, and they want it to be everywhere. There's no surprise that pornography is in places that students spend a lot of time. Because guess what? The largest group of people that watch pornography regularly, you might think like, I don't know, college kids, adult men. No, it's girls and boys ages 11 to 17. Those are the biggest consumers of pornography across the United States. And interestingly enough, you want to know the number one thing that's being searched for by other people is teen porn is being searched for by adults. And so if we look at that supply and demand, if more people want to look at images of teenagers, well, then that means we have a lot of demand. Well, somebody wants to make money off of that demand, and so they have to, what we say, satiate the demand. They have to provide for that. And so what do? They go to social media. They groom students. They try to build a relationship with them and get their photos so that they can get money. And so you see how this is an exploitive industry. Well, let me tell you something else. Well, the video tells us that pornography really truly can damage your brain and your relationships. And I know that this is hard to believe because everybody in school is looking at pornography. It's everywhere, and nobody seems to think that there's anything wrong with it. But I could tell you story after story after story after story of adults who were exposed to pornography, and it's not even close to the pornography that's available right now. I'm talking about one-page magazines that don't move, that are difficult to get your hands on. Nothing like the pornography that's out there today. There's endless amounts of porn. You're never gonna get to the end of it. It's all free, and it's totally different. 88% of the pornography out there is violent, and it's specifically violent toward women. And it's teaching people that don't know anything about sex these really damaging ideas. And so when you encounter this, especially, there's a strong connection between the earlier age that you encounter pornography, you're less likely to get married. You're more likely to get divorced the more often that you watch pornography and the earlier that you watch pornography. You're more likely to get pregnant as a teenager. You're more likely to get an STD. And guess what, girls? Ages 11 to 17 that watch pornography frequently, they're 75% more likely to be sexually assaulted or harassed than girls that don't watch porn. Why? Well, the porn industry is teaching us that it's normal for there to be violence in a sexual situation, and it's normal for the man to do the violence to the woman because she always looks like she's enjoying it. She's always happy. Remember, this is a movie. That's why the video says pornography is fake. That's not what relationships are like in real life. Relationships are about love and respect and kindness and mutual consideration of the other person's need, but that's not what you see in pornography. You never see STDs, you never see pain, you never see unwanted pregnancy, you never see infections and other things that I'm not going to mention that are a result of some of the pornography that's out there. And so what a lot of people don't realize is that porn is progression. The little brain says, your brain wants more dopamine, and so you keep going back, but you never feel satisfied. And so you get frustrated, you isolate, you want to be alone, and you might feel shame about what you're doing, but you can't stop because your brain literally wants more. So this is more than just a moral or a spiritual issue. You're literally changing your brain. They've looked at brain scans of people that look at pornography and people that don't, and they look different. There is actual physiological changes that are happening in your brain. And so for you to just go, well, okay, I'm just going to stop looking at porn, a lot of the time that's not possible. You're actually dealing with an addiction that progresses. And so you might think, it's normal, it's natural, everybody's doing it. But remember that when I was talking about the demand, that there are people that want to meet up with minors to have sex with them? Nobody is born a pedophile. Culture tells us that they all look a certain way, they drive a white van with no windows, and they're balding, and they are just creepy, and they hang around in Chick-fil-A or the mall waiting to grab kids or like take pictures of them and give them candy. That's what culture tells us a pedophile is, and we make fun of them, we tease them. But guess what? Nobody is born deciding that they're sexually attracted to an 8-year-old. No one. It's progressive, and it happens from pornography. And so the brain wants more and more pornography, so they go get more and more, and just like a drug, eventually the person on drugs, they overdose because their body says, I need more of that substance. I need to get the high. And sometimes they die, and it's tragic. You can't die of a pornography overdose, so what do? Well, then you want to be around it. You want to start being in relationships, and you're going to act out the things that you've seen in pornography because you think that's normal. And that's certainly not normal, to be violent toward women, to be demeaning or humiliating toward women. But sometimes women aren't really interested in that, and so somebody they've grown up, they've left their parents' house, maybe they're in college, they're going to go to a strip club. Well, that's not going to do it for them eventually because the brain needs more dopamine. So actually, 18-year-old boys that watch pornography regularly are significantly more likely to purchase sex than boys that don't. So you see how this is a cycle? And you see why I said it's really, really important that we have men that understand this. But to go even further, people sometimes still see like, I don't get it. I don't really see a problem here. I'm not hurting anybody. Even if I'm hurting myself, whatever, my emotions, it's making me depressed, it's lowering my self-esteem, which porn definitely does. It can even cause physical issues, whatever. I don't care about any of that. At least I'm not hurting anybody. Well, what you may not understand is that the people on the other end of the camera, most of the time they're trafficking victims. There's somebody that's not there willingly. There are very few people that are actually porn stars, and you never know who is and who isn't. The vast majority of them are somebody that got themselves in a life situation, somebody's manipulated them, somebody's groomed them, and they're being forced to do this. Did you know that there's about 100 pages of regulations of what you can do with an animal on a Hollywood movie set? These are like rules, like 100 pages of rules of how you can treat animals when you're filming them for movies. Do you know how many pages of rules and regulations there are for how you treat actors in a porn film? 0. There's 0 regulation in the porn industry. That means that people can be abused, violated, horrible things can happen to them, and there's nobody to protect them. And so by watching that, unfortunately, you're contributing. So maybe you just think, porn is a way that I de-stress, it's a way that I comfort, it's a way I deal with anxiety. Well, that thing that you're using to cope is actually enslaving someone else. And we don't want to be a part of that. And it starts by talking about this because people don't know. They don't know. And it's unfortunately very unlikely that even your parents will talk to you about pornography because maybe their parents didn't talk to them about it or they don't know how. And they don't know that you've already been exposed to it. And so if you're already watching pornography, you're not alone. Girls, if you're watching this, you are not alone. Many girls have this idea that they're weird or they're broken or they're dirty because they think this is just a boys thing. It's definitely not. Girls and boys can get addicted to cigarettes, sugar, video games, social media, alcohol. It's all the same. Pornography is no different. And so we have some resources for you. I think it's on the next page. So we have this cool website. It's called purelove.org. You can even watch that brain video, and that sexting video is on there. I'd encourage you to share those on social media. We got to get those crazy things on TikTok that aren't true off of there and replace it with some truth. But this website is where you want to go. So this website has a frequently asked questions section, and we've compiled questions from students all over the country that ask us questions about porn. So I guarantee if you have a question about porn, you're going to find an answer on here. And if you can't, you can send us an email and we'll answer it for you. We have resources on there like, hey, maybe you want to quit porn yourself. There's some apps you can download to help with that. There's some conversation starters about how you talk to your parents or somebody you trust because you're probably going to need help with this. And it's a really, really brave and courageous thing to do, but something that's really, really important for your future, and ways to help your friends and to just kind of change the conversation so that people can understand that this isn't harmless and it's something that can have lasting effects on you and the community. So check it out, purelove.org. And I think our last slide, let's see where we are, next one, is our safety planning and then your homework, what I'm going to leave you with. So here's some just really practical do's and some don'ts. So do keep your personal information off social media. Consider what's behind you in the photos that you're taking or the videos, because people can learn a lot about you with your background, and people often don't think about that. Also, don't use the check-in feature on social media. You can post about where you've been and things, but wait until you're already home or a couple of days later. Create an online friend policy. Decide, how are you going to respond when you get a friend request from somebody you don't know? How many mutual friends do you need to have? Do you need to have met them in real life? Come up with a plan. Talk to a trusted adult. This doesn't have to be your parent, but somebody you trust to help you create a plan. Because if you have a plan ahead of time, then you're going to know what to do when this happens. Check your settings and your location services. Make sure those are off on your phone. Decide who is safe to talk to when you're approached online, and make a plan. You may think that this is never going to happen to you or any of your friends, but if you decide now who you're going to tell, it's going to be much easier for you if you end up in this situation. And there are a lot of adults that care about you, and if you don't know anybody, please send us an email because we're happy to help you with that. Next one. And our don'ts. Don't meet someone in person that you met online. I know this can be tempting, especially during the pandemic. We're all so sick of our family, and our little brothers are driving us crazy, so we just want to hang out with some strangers and meet them at Starbucks. Not a good practice. Don't move to a second online location with a stranger. Be careful when you're using those apps like Discord about giving away your personal information or accepting money. Don't let other people use your phone. They can end up finding out things about you to blackmail you. Don't send photos you wouldn't want in the wrong hands, and don't share your usernames with other people. Next one. Now, this is a good number to have in your phone. You can send a text to, it's be free, but it's 233-733, and you can ask questions here, or if you know somebody in your school that you just think like their story just isn't right and you're just kind of worried, or you just don't know, or you see something when you're out at a gas station or a hotel, you can make an anonymous report. You can talk about questions that you might have, and so it's something to always have on hand. It's better to make a report, send a text message, let somebody know something, than not to say anything at all. Next one. Okay, let's test your knowledge and see if you can answer these. These are the questions from the beginning. Predators target students that they don't know. False. They might target someone that they don't know initially, but they're going to make a relationship with them. We call that the grooming process. Only girls or women can be victims. False. We saw that boys can be victims, and there's lots of different ways that boys can be victimized, including video games, dating, etc. Trafficking involves kidnapping or moving somebody. False. Sometimes that happens, but it's not necessary to be considered trafficking. People being trafficked are held against their will. Also false. We learned that trafficking can happen when you're living at home. It can happen over the internet from the danger zone of your device when you're alone in your bedroom. Trafficking happens to foreigners or people in other countries. This is kind of a trick question because that is true, but it doesn't only happen to them. It happens to people living here in our country as well. Trafficking only happens in the city? Definitely not. It's a here problem, wherever here is for you. Most kids that are trafficked come from troubled homes. Yes, that can maybe make them more vulnerable, but that's definitely not everybody. Everybody is at risk of being trafficked. Trafficking can happen online. Yes, it can. Frequently. Happens frequently in our community. Pornography is connected to human trafficking directly. It drives the demand. And lastly, sexting can put you at risk for exploitation. Absolutely. So now what? What do you do with this information? Well, if you do use social media, we are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and then our TikTok is a little bit different. It's a model of something that we're going to be launching, maybe even in your school this year, called Help Locker. So find us at help-locker on TikTok. Stop watching porn, get help, visit that website, purelove.org. If you see something, say something. Make that report to 233-733. Set up a safety plan for yourself. Figure out who that safe person is that you're going to talk to, and some of your own personal boundaries for sending photos, for responding to messages from strangers and friend requests and things like that. And do your part. Connect us to your school. We'd love to speak there, your club, your group, or your community. That's my information. If you have questions for me, feel free to reach out to me anytime. Send me an email, give me a call. I'm happy to chat and answer your questions. And that's all I have for you all. Make sure that you stop by our table if you're here with us in person. I have a bracelet for you. You can sign up for some information, and you can hear about a really exciting event we have happening this summer called our Youth Leadership Academy. It's an 8-week opportunity for student leaders in our community to really make a difference in a program that is launching here in our county. It's going to look really good on your resume. You're going to be around other like-minded students that care about these issues of injustice. You're going to be talking about things every week and engaging in projects in the community. It's going to be really exciting, and you don't want to miss out. So please feel free to talk with me about that to find out more information, or you can email me if you're visiting this online if you'd like to figure out about the Street Grace Youth Leadership Academy. That's it. Thank you all so much.